Hi, in this video we're going to be talking about sanding, one of the most important elements in setting up your PitBull guitar. The guitar arrives and you're probably pretty excited, you want to get in there and set it all up, but if you want a good product, good end product, you need to take some care and take some time with it. And to start off with, you want to sand it properly. So I'm going to introduce you to one of our PitBull team members, Phil Watson, who's a qualified cabinet maker, and he knows a lot about wood. Phil, good day.
Adam, how are we going?
So Phil, what we've got here is an EX1 PitBull kit. This is the body from the EX1. And you and I noticed when the shipment arrived, the quality of the wood was very good straight out of the factory. It probably didn't need a lot of sanding, but why do we want to sand the body down, Phil?
Well, you want an absolute perfect mirror finish on this so that it's a good solid surface to actually paint or varnish. If you're actually varnishing, you want a better finish than if you're painting. Also, we noticed a few machine marks on there.
What are machine marks?
Just ripples in the timber that are going across the grain here, where the machine has actually hit it.
Alright. So really, for the first part of sanding, we want to get rid of any imperfections in the surface. We want to be able to feel a nice mirrored finish, because a mirrored finish now will be a mirrored finish later. Okay, Phil, so we're ready to sand. What do we need?
You need 3 grades of sandpaper. I use the wet and dry type because you can reuse these later on when you're actually painting.
And that's available from like Bunnings?
Get this at Bunnings, any hardware store basically. Now I've chosen a 240 grade, a 600 grade and a 1200 grade.
Right, and those numbers just mean how fine the grain is. So the higher the number, the finer the grade and the softer it feels. So the 240 feels quite rough. What was that, a 600? 600 is slightly less rough, and the 1200 is actually quite smooth. Now the other thing we're going to need before we start sanding is a cork sanding block. You can get those at Bunnings as well, they're only about $1. And these sandpapers are only about 80 cents each. So Phil, you're going to start sanding, so you're obviously going to start with the coarser sandpaper, and that is the 240?
The 240, you always start with the lower number and work your way up to the higher number.
All right.
Alright, you only need a quarter of a sheet of your sandpaper. The easiest way is to just fold it and get a good crease along the edge there like that. This way. And then when you're getting it on your block, just fold it like that, really tight around the edges so you don't have too much of a curve there. And there you go, simple as that. Now when you're sanding, try to sand in line with the grain that you can see here. The reason for that is if you put scratches across the surface, you've got to resand it and resand it to get the scratches out, otherwise you will notice them in the finished product.
Right. And on this one, the grain's pretty clear. It's pretty clearly running up and down this way.
Yep.
So that's not hard to see.
Firmly, just try to get so that you're not rocking the sanding block. Try to hold it firmly and push it and pull it in the direction of the grain.
So Phil, what about doing these curved edges? How do we get around those edges smoothly?
Well, again, use the block. Hold the surface really firm again, and again in the direction of the grain. When you come up to these curved bits, it can be very difficult if it's a tight curve like this one. So that's when we remove it. Just use our fingers on the curve.
So you take the sandpaper off the block and just use your fingers?
Use the finger on the curve. One finger on a curve like that, or two. Just keeping the surface of the sandpaper really firm.
Alright, so Phil's now been over this entire guitar with the coarse 240. So he's going to take it down a step and he's going to go down to the 600, is it Phil? Down to the 600 grain, and that'll give a finer, smoother finish again. Okay, so Phil's now gone over this completely with the 600. Now we're going to get down to our finest grade, which is the 1200. And he's got that there on the block. And the 1200, Phil, that just gives a real mirrored finish to the guitar, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gives a very, very smooth surface, you know, that saying, smooth as a baby's bottom, that's exactly what this is about. Really, really smooth. When you're sanding here, just use 1 or 2 fingers, again, firmly on the surface, so that you're not actually creating any divots. All the way around, all of the curves, again, you know, use your fingers, very sensitive. Feel any bumps, there's a little bump.
Sorry, I noticed you're not using the block this time, Phil. Is that for any particular reason?
Well, the block, it's very hard to get into the curves and keep it smooth around the edges when you've got another curve coming up. So you just use fingers, keep your hand flat, your palm flat, use the surfaces of your fingerprints.
Alright, so Phil's done the 1200 sanding, and I've got to say, it feels fantastic, Phil. It's really like a mirrored surface now. There's no, I can't feel any imperfections in the wood. Feels fantastic. What do we need to do now, Phil?
We want to make sure that there is no dust whatsoever in all of these grooves in here, on the surface, anywhere, because that'll just give you a horrible little bump when you paint, and you'll have to sand it off anyway. So paintbrush is very good for this. If you want to, you can use a cloth to just make sure. If you really want to make sure, you're worried that there could be some dust, you can dampen this cloth, but then you've got to let the guitar dry for about an hour, just to make sure that it's very dry before you put paint on.
Alright, then a final check, make sure you got all the dust and grit off, and it's feeling fantastic, and I think we're ready to paint.